Dolphin fans. Let's go! What is good, Fin Nation? What's good? It's your boy Reason, and we are back here for another one, a special Friday midday matinee for all of you. I hope everyone had a fantastic week, and you are only a couple of work hours away from the weekend, so enjoy them. And here we are to help you pass some of that time. And joining me today, a friend of the show, been on here multiple times, always a great conversation, always a great guest to have on, the Sun Sentinel's own David Furones. David, thank you for joining me today.
Yes, sir. What's up, Reason? Always good to join you, man. Always a good conversation.
Always a great conversation, man. Love speaking with like-minded football minds like yourself. So hey, before we get into it, how was I forgot to ask you before we went live, and I know you touched on it. How was the Open, man? How was the how was the tennis?
Yeah. The Dolphins always real good with the media. Nice gesture from the organization. Invited us out to the Miami Open, which of course takes place on the same Hard Rock Stadium grounds. But they do so much, the Dolphins do, with in the offseason with the Miami Open there, moving there from its Key Biscayne location past 4 years. And then also F1 Miami Grand Prix, that's coming up soon. So you see the construction on site that's going on while you have that. We had a nice little section with Dolphins communication staff, Dolphins beat writers. We had food, drinks. It was a nice time. It was cool out there. We got a few of us rode the gondola and saw the whole, because any fan who knows, who has been out to the stadium, sees those gondolas out there. And I don't know if many people have gotten a chance to ride it, but it's really cool when you get that overhead view and see the whole stadium campus. So we had a good time out there.
Yeah, Bon Jovi was even out there too, eh? Starstruck, eh?
Oh, okay.
He was wearing a Dolphins hat too. He's wearing a Dolphins hat too. So there you go.
Okay, yeah. Funny, yeah. When we rode the gondola, I was quoting him. I was like, "We're halfway there," and
there you go.
We got to one side, and then we're circling back to the other.
That's
I didn't know he was out there.
There
he
you
must
go.
have been in the air.
You could feel the energy, David. That's what it was.
Yeah. It was
That's awesome. All right, man. Let's get into it. Let's start off with, I want just to hear your thoughts on to his fifth-year option. I mean, do you think it was the right decision given how we've seen the market, i.e. Daniel Jones, go?
Yeah, I mean, you look at what Daniel Jones is making, and you're talking franchise quarterbacks are going for over $40 million. And I mean, you get a fifth year for at 23.1, 0.2, whatever it is for Tua's fifth year. You got to commit to it now, of course. And if the Dolphins are committed to Tua Tagovailoa right now as your starter, as they say they are, then yes, it's the right move. You get him in 2024 for that $23 million figure, which in today's terms is a bargain, really. So, yeah, I mean, now with the injury concerns, obviously you had the concussion concerns from last season, previous injuries that he's had. I know that's still a question mark, but it's really just 1 year that you're adding on to what you already said you were committed to, which they left last season saying we already know he will be the starter for 2023. So now you already know you can get him at a reasonable figure in 2024, and then you can take it from there. If you still want to go year to year, you can still have the franchise tag after that, or you can find, hey, yes, he is certainly the guy that we want long term, and then commit to him with a long term contract. But right now, still, you still have him on his rookie contract, and then a $23 million figure for 2024. That looks great to just be able to put all the pieces around him and spend around him, as we have seen the Dolphins do in this win now mentality that they have shown.
So, I mean, we're going to cover free agency, but just because we're talking about Tua's fifth-year option and such like right now, let's stick with a quarterback on the roster here. How do you see things playing out with Skylar Thompson given the Mike White edition? And I mean, because he Mike McDaniel said something very interesting to you guys in one of his immediate availabilities with you. It might have been the one with him and Greer to close out the season. You'll remember. I'm sure you have a better memory with me of this because you listen to it, then you got to write it, and so I'm sure it's like seared in there. Do you remember when he said, and he was talking about how he said, and I'm paraphrasing, but I'm using the correct verbiage he used. So he said, Tua and the team are, he said, I like where Skylar's developing and I like how he's coming along. But he said Tua is in a different place and the team is in a different place. Remember he said that? Like, those are the words he used. I remember he said Tua's in a different place than Skylar and the team's in a different place than Skylar. And then you saw the Mike White edition. And let's be honest, the kid's got potential. He needs to be developed. We all knew he was a couple-year project. This guy was not going to come in and blow the top off. And how do you see this shaking out? Because the reason why I added that for the context, David, is I don't think you could sneak him onto the practice squad. Are we going to go another season where we're rolling with 3 quarterbacks on the roster?
Yeah, I think most certainly. And I mean, what they've said about Skylar Thompson is, he is certainly in that mix to compete to be the number 2 quarterback for QB2. So even before they signed Mike White, the idea was kind of, now it's not just certainly he's making the roster as QB3, which he did make as a 7th round rookie last year, but now it's on the roster, having a chance to compete for QB2 with whoever is brought in. And then now that ends up being Mike White. So White still doesn't have that much experience. I mean, last year they brought on Teddy Bridgewater. They liked because of the abundance of experience that he had, so many starts under his belt, and obviously another homecoming. So there's the connection there. Now 3rd straight year that the Dolphins have a South Florida quarterback brought in as a backup. But now, I think we'll see some competition. Mike White, Skylar Thompson. Skylar Thompson has been with Mike McDaniel now for a full year, and Darrell Bevell, the whole 9, Frank Smith, and Chandler Henley, assistant quarterbacks coach as well, who deserves a lot of credit for the work that he's done with the quarterbacks since Mike McDaniel and his staff have arrived.
I agree.
So now Mike White, similar system under Mike LaFleur in New York. So just that sort of some continuity, not working directly with the same coaches, but now that should translate over, and then they'll be working together. And the Tua's in a different place. Well, when you heard that, what was it that you took away?
What I took away from was, this is what I took away from it. Skylar's not ready to start. Oh, they know that, and they said. The way I took it was, okay, not only obviously Tua's our starter, that's why he's in a different place, but the way I took it was when he said the team's in a different place, what I took that was he's not ready to start. This team is in a place where if Tua can't go, we need someone who's ready to start. That's how I took that in terms of like, we need someone who, because let's be honest, I mean, if we had Mike White, and I agree with you, he doesn't have a much more experience, but he does have a little bit more, let's call it flash in a pan, because he did have those 2 good games, right? So he does have a little bit more flash in a pan. I think we can all pretty much agree we probably win that game in Buffalo if Mike White's a starter.
Oh, yeah, I'd go with that. Yeah. Now, Mike White has shown like some really high highs and
some really low lows. I agree. Yeah. So but you can tell Skylar was limiting how they wanted to push the ball. I mean, you saw it, right? I mean, there were times where it was obvious he didn't know what they were even running. Like, he didn't know where guys were supposed to be, and he was throwing footballs.
The communication was slow.
Like you could tell he just wasn't ready, right? And the game was moving fast. He didn't have a total grasp of the playbook to be confident, because you could tell there were certain dropbacks where you could tell he didn't know all the route cons. He didn't know all the progressions, and he didn't know all the route concepts. I mean, because I even when Tua was out, me and my guys, we'd break down the film every week on the quarterback position still, right? Even if Tua was out, we'd do Teddy Tuesday or Skylar Thompson Tuesday. It didn't matter, right? And you would see it. It was just obvious. He just wasn't there yet. So that's why when he said, the team's in a different place and Tua's in a different place, that's why I just took that as they're just understanding he's not ready yet. And more than likely, it's too much to expect him to take that big of a leap in this offseason. Like, it just, for where the team is in terms of, this team is a legitimate Super Bowl contender. Skylar Thompson's not ready to, man the helm of a Super Bowl contender yet. He might be able to man the helm of a team that's tanking or, whatever. Like, we're just out there for the pick and go get them, guys. You know what I mean? But not for where this stage this team is at. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. Or get thrown into one regular season game that you just need him to manage it. Because you did see him manage some situations. The Jets win. That's all he needed to do was just not make a big mistake. The defense was going to take control of the Jets offense. They win. They go up 9-6 with the late field goal, add on the safety at the end, 11-6. Very ugly score, very ugly game. But that's all you needed to get into the playoffs. And then in that Buffalo game, the defense forcing those turnovers. You still had the 2 interceptions from Skylar. Well, he also had he did hit Jalen Waddle deep, and then Waddle dropped that one early, which that one was a little devastating early on to not be able to. I mean, that would have been a huge confidence boost.
That was a great throw.
Yeah. So, I mean, he did hit that one. I know he was.
Oh, he had some flashes. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. Like, but you remember, what was it? Was it that Jets game? What was the game where he came in for Teddy when Teddy went down?
So there were 2 because Teddy.
The one where, because I'm talking about, you remember that throw to Tanner Connor up the seam, but it was only about a 5 to 7 yard throw. But you could tell Skylar doesn't even understand NFL touch yet because he was freaking slinging it, and Tanner Connor, like, boom, right off his hands. But you could tell it's because he doesn't understand. He doesn't even understand.
Was that in preseason?
No, that was during the regular season.
In the regular season,
it was Tanner Connor up the seam for about a 5, 6, 7 yard, and it was a third down. It was a third down, and it hit Tanner in the hands, but it was because the Herbert effect, right? Herbert, he'll break your fingers inside of 10 yards, right? Because he doesn't have that touch, right? And, you could tell Skylar just didn't understand how to touch the ball even yet. You know what I mean? So he's growing. I love his skill set. I love his tool set, but, there's a reason why a guy like, I was infatuated with Jordan Love coming out of Utah. I thought he was a poor man's Patrick Mahomes. When you look at the off-platform throws, everything he could do. But you know what I said? Because I wanted Tua, I wanted Burrow, Tua, or Jordan Love. But I said with Jordan Love, you got to sit him for 2 years. You cannot throw him out, and that's what I recognize. So that's why I don't harp on Skylar, because I recognize he's a 2 to 3 year project until he might even be ready to be a legitimate or even see if he's a legitimate NFL starter, right? So, we'll see how it works out. You mentioned someone, though, who I thought was the best signing of the 2021 offseason, Darrell Bevell. Him coming back, did that speak volumes to you as a guy who's covered the Hurricane? You've covered, all different teams of all different levels of sport. To you, did that show you a vote of confidence of not only in Tua, but in Mike McDaniel and what they're building here and what they could be on the cusp of?
Yeah, I mean, reportedly he was requested for interview for a Jets OC opening and turned that down to stay in Miami. So it shows, he believes what Mike McDaniel's doing, believes in his work with Tua Tagovailoa. And when you talk about guys who, and I see a comment. It was the first Jets game. I was about to interject with that. I looked up Tanner Connor's game log. I was like, I can't remember many times Tanner Connor. And then he had a target in that Jets game when Bridgewater came out the first play. Sorry, what were we saying?
Darrell Bevell,
but his work with Tua, and I mean, this is a guy. His experience speaks for itself. That he's seen it. He's worked with whether it be Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers, which actually, if he would have gone back to the Jets, it looks like he would be back working with them.
Hey, David, did Darrell Bevell pick Tua over Aaron Rodgers? Is that how this works on Twitter?
Oh, is that the narrative we're going with?
Anyways, go ahead, bro.
It happened much earlier than any of that developed.
I'm just joking. Yeah. Go ahead, though. Sorry to cut you off. I apologize.
No, I was just about done. Yeah, I mean, the resume that he has, the guys he's worked with, so you could tell he sees it in Tua as well, just from working with them and getting that year, and he probably has a vision of what it could look like with another year of working with Tua.
All right, before we get into free agency and stuff, and start getting into specifics here, let's shift to the Ramsey trade. And I got to ask you a question. Let's start off generally. You're sitting back looking a week after free agency. Do you see them keeping X and Ramsey Do you see them keeping that pairing together for more than a season? Or do you expect them to move off of X unless he's lights out? Because I think, my friend, if we're going back to splitting the field in half, X not having to travel, and what's the one thing I think we all noticed to pay attention, when he was traveling, he was having groin issues, all of us, you know what I mean? Steady. So split the field back in half, like when Byron, it's going to take it's going to take some of the workload off Javon Holland. So I think we might be on the cusp of one of the best secondaries here. But do you think X could Ramsey could basically extend X's shelf life in Miami? Because I think we all thought they were going to try and move off that money pretty soon, within the next year or two, right?
Yeah, now you have a situation where Ramsey can, and there's so many ways you can play it in Vic Fangio's system. I mean, Ramsey in a similar defensive scheme in LA, Brandon Staley out there. So, sort of a protege has come under that same tree of defensive coaching. And yeah, Jalen Ramsey was used in that star role where he could really be all over the secondary. So he could be on the boundary. So he could follow a number one guy. He could. There's going to be more zone concepts too than there was before. Than Josh Boyer's defense putting so much of that press man reliance on those corners and then blitzing guys. So it was kind of the corners were left alone on an island. Now maybe it'll be easier on X's legs if he's in more zone coverages and eyes on the quarterback, can go in and snag some more interceptions like we've seen him be that ball hawk, even if he's not necessarily locking guys down in coverage. But if he can go make game-changing plays that way, then that's a huge plus for the defense. And yeah, just Ramsey's versatility. You put him on the boundary, put him in the slot, have him cover a tight end if you need to. He even said he'd be down to blitz off the nickel or dime position. So there's just so much you can do with him. And then also I think just Fangio's scheme will work better in maintaining Xavier Howard's legs. And so I think you look at this season, see how X holds up, because if he now has back-to-back seasons, and really, well, some of 2021, we had some injury concerns as well, but then he did bounce back and was a huge plus, making these game-changing plays, interceptions, that forced fumble and fumble recovery in the New England game opener of 2021. So you did still see some of that. You didn't see much of it last year. In fact, that interception against San Francisco, even it was on a fourth down. It was like, actually, if he bats it down, then they have better field position. So if we see the old X, at least some version of it, especially with Jalen Ramsey on the other side, then that'll be something that you want to keep going, especially if you are trying to win now. But I do like the workload that it might take off of X in hopefully having a bounce back season that we get to see from him.
Nick 3 said, hey, recent blessing in disguise with the Byron Jones situation, right? Getting Jalen Ramsey instead of JC Jackson, because the word on the street last year was
right.
What I was told, David. I don't know if you heard the same, but this is what I was told. I was by multiple people. I was told the reason why he got that surgery in March and not January when the season ended is because he got wind that we were trying to move him. And from what I understand, Boyer was banging the table for us to bring in JC Jackson. And that's what I was led to believe. So that's why that part of the comment was there, just for context, so you understand that. All right. Okay. So on paper, I got to ask the real question. On paper, because there's still a bunch of Flores apologists in our fan base still. Usually the two haters are the Flores apologists. Funny how that works, eh? On paper, does this defense look better than any defense Flores managed to put together after that Ramsey trade and the first week of free agency, and with Vic Fangio at the helm of it?
Yeah, I mean, well, talent-wise, yeah, I mean, it's huge. Flores always kind of was able to get the most out of those defenses, but I mean, just you look at the names and you think of it like if you were building a Madden roster and you have just like the overall ratings that you have at all these different positions of Jalen Ramsey, and then X if he's able to bounce back in the secondary, Javon Holland, that's just a secondary, and then up front, Christian Wilkins and Zach Sealer. And then on the edge, Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, like every level. You have David Long could be a nice pickup. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about him and other free agent pickups. But yeah, and then you have some competition, whether it be now at the other safety between Deshaun Elliott coming in, Brandon Jones. So you could get the best out of each one of those guys. Nick Needham, trying to get him to come back, and you have Kader Kohu now coming off a season where he did get a lot of experience as an undrafted rookie out of necessity. And then, so now you have him coming off of that. So there's going to be competition for that spot. So yeah, I mean, this defense just at every level, and with what Vic Fangio is going to do, it could be really nasty.
It's nasty. And, you know, it's something that I don't think a lot of people have covered enough, David, and I've been harping on it since we got Fangio, even before we got Fangio. You know, you look at Tua, and, okay, you look at, you know, his record against Bill Belichick. You look at how he beats man coverage, right? You look at how he beats the blitz. What did he see in practice since he's been a pro, right? You know, what system what were we running constantly just as a team, right? You go back to his rookie year, David. His first ever start against the Rams. Right? You already mentioned who the defensive coordinator was of that team, right? Brandon Staley.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? Who was a protege of Oswino Fangio.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I would say the two biggest games he struggled that year were that and the Broncos game, correct?
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Against Vic Fangio himself.
Right? We're starting to see a pattern, right?
It's actually something I want to ask him. First time he talks.
I can't wait. Ask
yeah.
him, bro, because listen, this is what, okay, 11 teams in the NFL run some version of Fangio's defense right now. That's a third of the NFL.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
He struggled against Staley this year because Staley, again, was the first one to take away the middle of the field and start rerouting our receivers. And we hadn't seen that yet, right? San Fran, who runs a version of Fangio's defense at the time, they didn't even do that, right? Yeah. Anyways, and he struggled against them, and they ran a version of, and you see where my correlation's going here? The defenses that seem to give to a problem are these Fangio take away the explosive, the too high shell, disguise what you're doing. Yes. But they do it a lot. Like when I was breaking down film for Fangio's defense coming here, I was breaking down a lot of Bears film. All right. Mm-hmm. And I would see them run the disguise stuff, and you know, like that's what I love about Deshaun Elliott and Javon Hall. You don't know who the creeper is. You don't know who's coming up into that box, right? Anyways, I would watch all these quarterbacks against the Bears that in 2017, I believe it was. Yeah.
18.
Was it 18? Yeah, 2017, 2018, whatever, right?
Right before, because right before he got the Broncos job, he was
yeah. So I was watching, and what you would see is the only quarterback who I noticed started picking up the disguises, and this is what's key about why McDaniel has to fix his whole time management issue. Because this guy had a lot of time at the line because I think he knew he would need it, and the coaching staff, great coach who knew he needed it too. The only guy who I saw that year who started identifying stuff was Ben Roethlisberger. And how long had he been in the league at that point, right? And he was the only one who brother, he was walking up to the line, and he was backing off, and it was one of the few times I've ever seen Ben Roethlisberger checking like a madman, like just
looking like Peyton Manning out there.
Exactly. And just checking and pointing, and he got the completion and he got the first down, right? So my whole point is a lot of quarterbacks struggle with what Fangio and these guys run, but my friend, he's gonna see when you heard McDaniel say that him and Fangio had conversations about football and why he runs certain things and when he chooses to run certain things for hours, when he told you guys that, I almost fell out of my chair like the Vince McMahon meme, because David, these people don't realize, I think we were already going to be potentially a historic offense in year 2. But now if you unlock the secrets of that defense to not only Tua, but Mike McDaniel, and a third of the league runs it, and that's really all we struggled against, because I don't care what no one tells me, David, the defense let us down in Buffalo in December, not Tua Tagovailoa, and a concussion cost Tua Tagovailoa in Green Bay, because guess what? Newsflash, before the concussion, Tua Tagovailoa was back into MVP form that game. He was lights out. Aaron Rodgers wasn't even in the same stratosphere before that concussion happened. So, you know, like, David, I want your thoughts on that, because you said you're going to ask him about it. You've obviously thought about it. Come on, David. I know you're a Dolphin. Does that not excite you that, oh my God, we might see another level to this offense, David?
Yeah. He's going to be seeing it in practice all the time. So now just those reps are going to be fantastic for the offense as well. So sort of a double bonus there.
And McDaniel, man, McDaniel, like it's just gonna unlock. I think more. It's just gonna make him a better coach. And I honestly, uh, I'm so jealous of you because of all the practices you're gonna be at where all the fans are not at, and the things you're gonna see. And man, it's gonna be. You are in for. I think you are in for probably one of the funnest training camps since Marino was around.
Ooh, it will be. Yeah.
Or maybe just since Ricky was here.
Yeah. Those years too, there were some Super Bowl expectations.
Yeah.
That, I know a couple of those teams didn't make the playoffs, but yeah, and I found it interesting. Fangio kind of downplayed the previous conversations that him and McDaniel had because everything I know a lot of us had heard was these guys are very like-minded, and those conversations they had previously, going back to when McDaniel first got here, that's the guy he wanted. So,
Yep.
He could see that. This is one. I know this is a difficult defense to go up against, so that's why I want him leading my defense. Speaking as McDaniel, and then obviously the like-mindedness that they probably have, even as they are different generations, but just that they are just these football guys in their own right on different sides of the ball.
Like David, when the report came out about the Ramsey trade, that Greer called McDaniel and Fangio in, and they started watching film on him. I was like, man, if I could be a fly on the wall, because the film gurus, like the minds that are sitting there watching this film, like, and you knew they were gonna come back with, yeah, go get that guy. Because honestly, I think with Ramsey, if you're gonna move on off X, we got all our picks back next year. You could go draft a corner, groom him as the number 2 behind Ramsey, and then if Ramsey starts to slow down a little bit, just shift him up to safety. I think he can play safety, no problem. I think Ramsey could be here for if you play the cards right, Ramsey could be a Dolphin for the rest of his career. I honestly believe that, and I can't believe Jalen Ramsey's a Miami Dolphin. This is
right.
You know what I mean? So let's get into free agency. Overall, what are some of your takes and thoughts on free agency right now?
Sure. Yeah. So the 2 major positions I always wanted to see the Dolphins address here. Well, they got one crossed off right before free agency with the Jalen Ramsey trade. So that's fantastic. And then inside linebacker, I also wanted to see them address. So getting David Long, a guy who has different metrics have shown, he can have a good run stuff rate. He can be solid in coverage, intercept some passes at the linebacker position. So I know coverage is something the Dolphins struggled with in the past. Now, he still gave up a high completion percentage, I noticed, but those interceptions kind of boost your quarterback rating against. And hasn't been giving up touchdowns, but defending backs out of the backfield, this defense needed to get better at that. Athletically, just being able to keep up with the scrambling quarterback. You need that. If Josh Allen is in your division, you need to be able to contain him. So, I love that move from that perspective. And I mean, it was a pretty economical choice as well. You didn't have to break open the piggy bank to get him. And you already decided, hey, you're bringing in Jalen Ramsey. That's going to be the big splash. You make the big money move. So I always kind of figured this offseason would be one big splash after they made the Tyreek Hill, Teron Armstead moves the previous offseason, and then the trade for Bradley Chubb. I figured, okay, maybe one big splash, and then they made that. And then some nice complementary moves to follow. I know some people would have wanted to see a running back move as well. I kind of like the idea of just bringing back Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson on cheap deals. I think they have the continuity with Mike McDaniel, that chemistry. And now, sure, Raheem Mostert at this age and his previous injury history, that's a concern. I know Chris Greer hasn't ever been scared to make a move based on a player's previous injury history, but I like the way they complement each other that second half of the year. I think the Dolphins' run game, if they commit to it a little bit more, it can be very efficient because it was efficient, 4.9 yards per carry, 4.7 yards per carry for Mostert and Wilson. So I think if you utilize that, then it'll show some benefits. And then still need some holes. I mean, the right tackle's still there that you still want to see a move there. And then some of the other moves, I'm sure we'll be talking about those, but those are sort of my immediate takeaways.
Yeah, like with Raheem Mostert, if he would have hit 200 carries, he would have been over 1,000 yards. And I don't think anyone would be complaining about us re-signing a 1,000-yard back for the price we did. And I still believe this, and I don't know if you believe this, David. I still don't think he was 100% recovered from the injury. Like, I think you're going to see a more explosive. I think you have a better chance of seeing that burst return this year, because I don't think he was 100% when he fully came back. He might have been 80, 90%. But then as the season wears down, then that toll starts to take on you too. So you're not, you know what I mean? Like, no player is, even 70% by the end of the season normally, right? So I just, I don't think we saw Raheem Mostert. And the thing is, you talked about how cheap they were, and we structured it where we can move off that whole room after 1 year. And it gives us a ton of flexibility. When we'll talk about some names here, if someone we're monitoring or if someone we like becomes available or someone in the draft falls in our lap, we're not committed to these. Play ball, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
short term, yeah.
So, what was your favorite move? Because, you talk about the David Long move, and I look at David Long and Deshaun Elliott as, I call it, high value moves. And what I mean by that is those are guys you get on I think a very team friendly deal. That, example. All right, David Long. Let's just round it, $5.5 million a year. Okay. You could very well get $9 or $10 million production out of the guy. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, high value, you could get higher production compared to what you're paying for. You know what I mean? And it looks like that's what they kind of do in terms of spreading their money around. They're like, okay, these guys might have a little injury history, but if they stay healthy, and it's a soft tissue stuff, if they stay healthy, man, we're going to get far greater production than what we're paying for. But what was your favorite move overall, when you look at what the Dolphins did once free agency and the legal tampering window were open?
Yeah, it might be that one right there, just based on the value that you can get. And yeah, Chris Grier has shown he is not worried about players' injury history, sometimes to his own detriment. But if David Long's hamstrings hold up, then you are going to get considerable value for that investment. So you got to like that. It wasn't really a move that was so much on my radar. I was kind of looking at a lot of the bigger name linebackers. I was there thinking like Bobby Wagner. I saw Eric Kendricks come up, Levante David from the South Florida connection, and maybe also South Florida guy Devin Bush as well. Though I know he kind of struggled at times in Pittsburgh, but so I mean, when I saw Long, then I said, okay, well, and I started coming along to idea, and I see why they do it, and I see why they went for him on that very same Monday, that first day, and they went after him right away and clearly targeted him to be that guy. And then now it'll be interesting to see whether it's him and Jerome Baker. That base salary of $8.4 million became guaranteed just a few days ago, March 19th. I see you shaking your head. But if they keep that, or if they do try to see if they move on from Baker and find another linebacker as well to pair with him, that'll be still one of the things to monitor. But hey, I'll defer to Fangio on whatever he thinks is best.
I agree with that. I agree with that. Listen, okay. Here's my issue with Jerome Baker. All right. This is because I don't think I've ever explained this to you. All right. So when we draft him, wide 9 will linebacker, basically. That's what he was. Wide 9 will 4-3 wide 9 will linebacker. Struggled early on when we made that transition to the 3-4. I always give him credit because he's gotten better every year in that 3-4 defense. I give him credit for that. All right. 110%. My issue with he has 100 tackles. He has 110 tackles. What good is 110 tackles when 70 or 80 of them are 4 to 5 yards beyond the line of scrimmage? And he can't disengage or shed blocks worth a good God, you know what? And so what good is a tackle 4 or 5 yards down the field when it's the blocker disengaging you so you can get the guy who's either parallel with you or he's ran past you? Because one of his greatest strengths is his pursuit speed's off the chart.
Right.
So, I think he's best utilized as an off-ball blitzing linebacker. Outside of that, I struggle to find his read and reaction ability, especially against RPOs, is him and Landon Roberts were just, a disaster to watch them against that, right? I think he a very big. This is what separates guys who don't work out on the interior and guys who do work out on the interior. His instincts, they're not good. He's not a very instinctual player, and because of that, like you watch David Long, Doesn't matter whether it's coverage or run, the instincts, man, that guy's filling the hole before the guards even out of his kicks, his kick step, man. Like, just the instincts, you see it, right? It just pops. And it doesn't pop with Jerome on that. So, when I look at the money we've paid him on the extension, I feel like he kind of got paid because he was a little bit of a teacher's pet to Flores. And I just don't think he was, I remember I was at the zoo with my best friend, his daughter, and my daughter when that contract came through. And I about fell out of the chair. And I went on Twitter and I said, this is such an awful contract because we were paying him what? I think he was in the top 10 when we paid him, right? He was a top 10 paid linebacker. I said, I can name 29 guys better than him right now. So what are we doing here, right? And people got, compare his stats. He's like Fred Warner. He's like Shaq Leonard. And I was like, what are you people watching? And now I've noticed some of the fan base has kind of, they like the player, but they don't like the money. And that's see, that's where I'm like that. And I've tried to tell people, like, Christian Wilkins. I love Christian Wilkins. Everyone loves Christian Wilkins. I love the player and the person in Christian Wilkins. I think he's amazing, but everyone's nuts if they don't think there's going to be pause and internal discussions if he comes and asks for a Daron Payne 4-year $90 million contract. There are going to be discussions I'm not saying they're going to move off of him, but there are going to be discussions of, hey, is this is this worth $22 million a year? Is this worth $22.5 million a year? Because remember, that's only about what, $7 million less than Tyreek. So, there's going to be discussions about that. And that's when, listen, I try to remove feelings from it. You know what I mean? I get some people with players, they can't, like you saw with Gesicki. People are losing their mind. Like we lost Travis Kelce, right? And it's like, did we? So anyways, you mentioned if they were all in earlier on Tua. So are you surprised by their reluctance to upgrade the offensive line to protect their investment?
Yeah, especially you haven't found a right tackle to bring in right now, and that's protecting Tua Tagovailoa's blind side as a left-handed quarterback. So they still seem to be holding out hope for Austin Jackson, and but you do want to bring in competition for him. Now, Brandon Shell was serviceable as a backup last year. Came in, did the job as a backup lineman, what you can expect. Austin Jackson, problem is, even as his development has kind of been stunted a little bit now with this year, which he played in 2 games, started 2 games, and each one of those couldn't make it through, and then ended up on injured reserve each one of those times. So that's I don't want to go as extreme as saying a wasted season, but just about. So he did learn some concepts in Mike McDaniel's system, I'm sure, and getting prepared for the season and studying film and getting acquainted, acclimated with this wide zone scheme. But now that was just a year where he didn't get much of the experience to put it on the field, and especially changing sides from being left tackle, left guard his first 2 years to now right tackle. So it's something that I definitely still want to see the team address. There's still plenty of time. They have the draft later on. Post June 1, a lot of money gets freed up with the Byron Jones release. So, any free agents that kind of are still sticking around by then, veteran guys that haven't made a decision, and then that's something to monitor, especially since the draft class is going to be small and it's not going to be a lot of money that has to go to those signings. So, something still to monitor, probably where you still need to address is on that line, specifically right tackle.
You look at like Trey Pipkins went for like $7.5 million a year. Caleb McGarry went for a lot less than what Jawan Taylor and McGlinchey went for. The right tackle market after those first 2 guys has been very, very fair in terms of how guys have been compensated. I basically take, because I agree with with everything you just said, but when I put it into blunt terms, it's like we're nicely saying that they're scraping the bottom of the barrel. And so are they really putting Austin Jackson and Liam Eichenberg in a true competition? Because it doesn't feel like they want to bring anyone in that's remotely competent, because then they're going to get beat out. And and that's that. Like, is that a fair assessment for me to say? I just, because I mean, people here, I've heard me and Richmond talk about it, and when you got a weak link at right tackle and you got a weak link at left guard, that's very hard to mask, right? Shifting protections and all that. Like, is that something? Is that a valid statement I made in your mind, that it doesn't seem like they're really giving a full blown effort to bring in some serious competition here, kind of like they want these guys to win their battles?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, these guys are their draft picks, high draft picks from recent drafts. So, yeah, there could be a tendency, like, yeah, we want to see this work out. We used a first round pick on Austin Jackson. We used a second round pick and traded up in the second round for a Liam Eichenberg. So, yeah, you want to see that work out. I know those are still the two question marks on the offensive line. You've upgraded from having 1 of 5 solidified last offseason to now fast forward. All right, you got 3 of 5 solidified after what the Dolphins have done, bringing in Teron Armstead and Connor Williams. Now, with those 2 spots still remaining, you still hope one of those guys can maybe get you the 4th. And then, obviously, I don't think they wanted to spend too much on an immediate replacement that you just know is definitely going to be the starter. So they went into this offseason looking for competition. Interior offensive line, bring in a guy like Dan Feeney, see what competition can provide for between him and Liam Eichenberg. Rob Jones still there at left guard, and maybe a Lester Cotton as well, who ended up getting that playoff start in Buffalo with the injuries piling up. And then right tackle, we just haven't seen it yet. You mentioned some names, but maybe a George Fan is still out there. Jermaine Elinor,
Cam Fleming.
Okay, so yeah. I think and now a lot of fans are clamoring on DJ Fluker.
Oh yeah. We're gonna talk about that. That's
okay.
That's next up. That's next on the docket. Knight says the question is regarding Baker. The question isn't is he worth it. The question is, can we afford it and still afford Waddle, Phillips, and Holland when they come up? You're gonna have to supplement through the draft, right? We all pretty much know that. What have your impressions been on DJ Fluker, who you mentioned? I mean, everyone sees he's bricked up. I mean, I had a conversation with someone yesterday. I said, I think everyone needs to pump the brakes a little bit here because, we can all agree DJ Fluker was never an elite player to the level of Deshaun Watson was. And we saw how being away from the game affected Deshaun Watson's game. So, it was now I'm sure Deshaun Watson will be much better this year, but it takes time. It's not just Madden, right? What are your overall thoughts on DJ Fluker? Because I'm going to tell you what I saw. I say, have you ever seen the movie Belly?
Oh yes, with Nas is in it, and
Nas and DMX. All right,
DMX is in it,
yeah. Do you remember that dude who walks outside the barber shop? He's got the glasses on, he's got the perm, and he's eating a banana, and he's like, "Oh, I don't like this. I don't like this," and he eats the banana, and then he's like, "Got to drop a dime on them," and he ends up dropping a dime.
That's the Jamaican one.
No, it was the guy working with Method Man. So
okay, yeah.
So that's why I was like, so that's what I pictured Greer was. They're looking at Fluker all bricked up, all ripped up. Then they saw him at the Alabama day moving everybody in front of him. He protecting that Austin Jackson pick, saying, "I don't like this." You know what I mean? What do you think? Could you see them bringing in someone like DJ Fluker for a try? Because I know a lot of fans on Twitter, for example, were trying. Because one of the fans, one of the Dolphin fans on Twitter is good friends with Reuben Foster, and we were having linebacker issues. He's Chris Sacconi, I believe, Sacconi or something like that, is Reuben Foster's barber, and was constantly vying for the Dolphins to give Reuben a look, bring him for a tryout. They didn't. Do you see them doing something with Fluker maybe, or do you see this as just a, just something that we're going to talk about for a couple of weeks and then it disappears?
Maybe so, because they did have a little bit of an experiment with him just a couple of years ago, a cup of coffee that Fluker had with the Dolphins, bringing him in, and then he got hurt, left with the waves with the injury settlement 4 days into training camp 2021. I was just starting out on the beat, and so then that went awry. But yeah, I mean, now he's up there in age. What is he now? He's past 30 for sure. 32 is he? 30. But yeah, lost some weight. He got himself in great shape. But yeah, being away from the game, I mean, pump the brakes on thinking he would be an immediate just plug and play, and he's looking great, looking fantastic. But something worth experimenting with and then bringing in for a tryout, I'd be all for that.
And Knight was talking about actually Wilkins, if they can afford Wilkins, if he's going to ask that and keep everyone together, right?
I feel like Wilkins, is a guy you have to make sure you extend, and then maybe you could get some immediate cap flexibility too with the extension, and then free up some space in this 2023 cycle. And I mean, he's a guy that you want to lock up long term. I would say
do you think that's coming when that money frees up? After do you see a Connor Williams or a Christian Wilkins extension? Because I've heard rumblings on Christian Wilkins. I've heard, maybe you have. I haven't heard really anything about a Connor Williams extension. Do you see one of those happening after June 1st when the money frees up?
I would think, yeah, Wilkins as a priority. And I mean, you mentioned Connor Williams. Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen much of it, heard much of it, or I mean, maybe thought about it a little bit. Hey, could be a candidate, but I mean, Wilkins, I would say as a priority. And I mean, that would be interesting. Connor Williams, especially, he had some snapping issues, but I mean, he's just been a rock at center. So you really like the move they made there. And now you've seen it for a year. And I think those snapping issues should get settled as he gets more reps, more snaps at center.
Are you – because I've been thinking about this, and I brought it a few times up on the show. Are you at all concerned about what Connor Williams might actually be asking for? Because he was already a top 5, top 10 run blocking left guard. He was a top 10 overall left guard. And now, we're starting to mold. I said after the snap, he was an all-pro for the most part, right? After the snap. But do you think they're getting into a situation where they're giving him all the leverage and he might price himself out of Miami because he could go to teams and I can say, I can give you top 10 guard play, or I can give you top 10 center play. And that is, can we remember, we know a lot of players that are interchangeable, but have we ever heard a player come to the table, but yeah, I can give you top 10 at center, or I can give you top 10 on the interior, wherever you put me. That's a very appealing mixture financially. So do you think this could get, if they don't have, because brother, they could have got Wilkins at probably about 13, 14, 15 million per year last offseason if they would have moved on it. And now, what are we talking about? Potentially a Daron Payne contract. Where are your thoughts on this Connor Williams thing? Because he's only got 1 year left.
Yeah, so 1 year left at what you got him for, and but yeah, I mean that positional flexibility is prime in the NFL on the offensive line, and you got a little bit of that with Robert Hunt too, guard tackle, but they like him at guard. That's why they moved him over there to begin with. But yeah, so you have a little bit of that. If out of necessity you end up needing him back at right tackle, like we saw them do late last season, but. Yeah, I mean, Connor Williams has been exceptional, and yeah, it could be a hefty price tag that he comes with, especially with how much of these future cap commitments they have in years to come. It's a window now for sure, where you're seeing, okay, it's going to start becoming very pricey very soon. So there is a window while you still have Tua on the rookie contract and the 5th-year option, which is still a bargain for the caliber of quarterback play that you hope to get. And then you got all these other guys, those draft picks from those classes. I saw the comments, between Wilkins, but then also with the Jalen and Phillips and Waddle and Holland. Yeah. And then you've got those guys coming up as well. So there will be some tough decisions to be made in years to come.
Do you expect the Dolphins to continue to monitor the Dalvin Cook situation and even the Derrick Henry situation, even though I think Dalvin Cook's a better fit because Derrick Henry's more of a gap north-south runner, right? Where Dalvin offers you more off the edge, just like an Austin Eckler would offer you more off the edge, I think, too. Now, don't get me wrong. I'd still do backflips. We got Derrick Henry. But do you see them continuing to monitor in case one of those guys become sellers? Because what I was told with Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook, I know the Bills were heavily in on Derrick Henry and they obviously ended up pivoting in a different direction. But I've been told because both teams don't believe they need to trade their running back right now, the asking prices are a little astronomical for what they have remaining on their contract, what needs to still be paid out, et cetera, et cetera. Because I don't think like Henry's got guaranteed money left, but Dalvin needs a little bit more guaranteed money, I think, flexed around. So what are your thoughts on that? Because we talked about the running back room. I mean, they're spending less than like $5 million between their two starters in that running back room, and they've given themselves the flexibility they could add something like that. And I was been told Dalvin Cook's willing to play ball if the Vikings are willing to move him here, he's willing to play ball contractually. Do you think they're going to continue to monitor those situations?
I would think monitor. I would think you still go into the season with this plan. I think that's why you bring back these backs on a team friendly deal, and guys that know the system. Mike McDaniel has worked with them for so many years, going back to their time together, all three of them in San Francisco. So I think if at some point in the season it's starting to show that it doesn't look the way you want to, and one of those guys becomes more available at a lower price, and that's something, you do continue to monitor. But I would say you go into the season with this plan, and then if something's not going right, like we saw last year with Chase Edmonds, and then you see the willingness to then make one move off of Edmonds, and then bring in Jeff Wilson in another move. So now this would be a larger scale thing if they pull off a coup for Dalvin Cook or Derrick Henry, and Henry, hey, if you could get him, then you just make it work.
Yeah, exactly.
Imagine him just bashing into the line when you have the speed on the outside of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and everything you can do, everything Mike McDaniel can scheme up. But now we're playing kind of like fantasy land visualizations there. But I would say, if it's something where the running game is an issue, or you have a major injury to one of those guys, then then at some point in the season, going up into the trade deadline, then maybe you continue to monitor that, and then potentially look to make a move if you need to make that big trade to get you over the hump.
Just a couple of draft questions before we get out of here, because you were down there at the combine in Indianapolis. Overall, before we get into those specific questions, I mean, how was your time down there in Indy?
Oh, excellent, man. It's early mornings and then late nights. You stay out late, just going out to a few of the bars where a lot of NFL people like to go, and you're meeting personnel from different teams. You never know who you'll run into. Not just Dolphins, but just across the whole league, all 32 teams are there. Run into agents, get to pick their brain about what's going on with their clients. A lot of the chatter, and even just other beat writers across the NFL. There's always so much valuable insight you can get from just chatting with them, and then hearing what they're hearing from the inside of covering those organizations, and then kind of tying into what you know about the team you cover, and just kind of getting this whole league-wide feel. And just the rumors that end up floating around.
What was the crazy? It doesn't have to be Dolphins. Yeah. What was the craziest thing you heard in Indy? Not on Twitter, but what was the craziest rumor you heard floating around in Indy?
Man, a lot of that stuff stays in Indy. So,
it's like Vegas, eh?
I would say some of the craziest stuff didn't turn out to transpire.
Yeah. So, obviously, right?
Because a lot of the chatter is about free agency, because that's really the immediate thing that everything's going into. So, sometimes you hear some crazy stuff floated around, and then some stuff. Then when the time actually comes, it doesn't all transpire. So
it's like being on Twitter. It's like being on Twitter.
Yeah. It ends up being like that. That's why as reporters, you have to be responsible and make sure you're hearing it from multiple sources, and make sure you're gauging whether there's a potential interest from that party involved in putting some stuff out there. So, but a lot of the stuff ends up just not actually happening. you come to learn once you go around in a couple of years.
Was there any Dolphins draft chatter you were hearing on the floor? It doesn't have to be free agency, but was there any Dolphins draft chatter in terms of like, where, that led you to believe where you expect they could go with their first two picks in the second or third round, positions they might have been interested, players, you felt that really felt that, that you get the feeling that they're really high on?
A little bit, but again, a lot of the conversations, because it's so funny. You go to the combine, and then it's a draft centric event, right? As far as the athletes testing and performing and showing out for those scouts, but then a lot of the chatter that going around is on coach movement that just happened, how different coaches will fit around, and then also just free agency coming up, and maybe some trade rumors going around, because that's kind of like the immediate thing that's about to happen. The combine end of February, early March, and then mid-March you get into free agency. So draft chatter a little bit minimal, but then also, for example, with the Dolphins, that now we're going on 2 straight years where they don't have a first round pick. Last year they still did at the time of the combine, so maybe more then, but now after not having a first or second last year, and then now not having a first this year, now they traded one of their top 3 selections, a third round pick in the Jalen Ramsey deal. So down to 4 selections at right now. Not too much, but probably just the stuff that you already kind of figure where you haven't hit in free agency yet. They did get a tight end in Eric Saubert, but maybe still looking for a tight end in this draft. If certain guys are there, then you probably figure they might go for it in the second round. We'll probably get into some of the names, but yeah, I mean, just Darnell Washington, who's just a freak of nature, and if you have a chance at him, then why not? But yeah, for a team that will now try to find a better fit in the system at tight end than Mike Gesicki, and a guy that Mike McDaniel will be looking to utilize more, then that would be somewhere I look. And then if they still haven't addressed right tackle, maybe they look for one. Maybe they look for a running back after they brought back everyone from last year on team friendly deals, and then you bring in another young back to groom and see how they fit, even if it's not on with those day 2 picks, but maybe with one of those late picks in day 3, and then have Mike McDaniel develop him. So yeah, just here and there, different things.
Could you, like you mentioned it's no secret tight end's obviously a massive need. Could you see them moving up for someone they like, i.e., let's say a Darnell Washington starts slipping? Let's say they really like Dalton Kincaid and he's slipping a little bit. Or could you see them maybe trade back from 51 if those guys aren't slipping and accumulate some more picks, because we know they love them, if they think maybe a Zach Kuntz, a Tucker Kraft, or a Luke Musgrave will be there in the 3rd, or if they can acquire a 4th and they can take one of those guys with an early 4th. Do you see them, being either aggressive to maybe move up to get a guy they like, or do you see them, try and maybe accumulate some more picks?
And there's so many different combinations of what you could do. As far as moving up, it might be more difficult because you really only have those 4 picks, and then so you'd have to use that one, and then it's just a 3rd that you have this year. You could go into your 2024 draft capital, but are they willing to do that right now while you still have a whole year to scout that draft class and look into it? Then maybe not, but maybe comparing that to what they might like if for some of the later round tight ends, or if there's an undrafted prospect that they just really like, this diamond in the rough kind of guy, like if they like Kader Coe, who was last year. So there's always that kind of like advanced scouting where if you feel you could get a much better bargain either late or undrafted, then maybe you don't need to expand draft capital. But if you love a guy, then you may be willing. But hey, I also looked at, you mentioned a lot of names there, a lot of which I like. Also, I mean, if you go late, then my guy right at Miami, Will Mallory, nice. I watched him train a little bit at Pete Bomarito's down here, and he ended up with the fastest 40. That was something that was important to him from interviewing him, that he wanted to show he is at his 6'4" stature, that he has this size and speed combination. Now, only 239, and probably the physicality aspect of the game you still have to look for with him. But if someone that's coming in brand new, then this staff can maybe develop him, whereas you saw it didn't quite work with Mike Gesicki, kind of the way he was used to playing the tight end position. It was difficult for them to convert him and get him to be the type of blocker that they wanted to fit. Maybe they do find a receiving type of tight end that they do feel they can develop into the adequate blocker in that aspect of the game, in the wide zone scheme that you can use in this offense.
Yeah, like I really like Zach Kuntz, and he's my tight end 7. Will Mallory is actually my tight end 12, and I'm
Right.
really
So later, yeah.
yeah, exactly later, right? I'm a big fan of. Excuse me. See, Zach Kuntz, you saw his. I don't know if you saw his Raz, but unbelievable. He scored the number 1 overall Raz since they've been doing tight end since 1987. All right, and it was just nuts. And 6'7", right? What is he, 259? But he's willing to be a blocker. His issue is technique. It's not willing and strength. He's got the will. He's got the strength. My problem with Mike Gesicki, here's my issue with Mike Gesicki. He was more worried about his hair's frost tips and running through a garage and catching a football over a house than he was perfecting his craft. Do you remember, David, when that picture came out of Tua with all the receivers on the field that perform, and it was on the weekend that offseason, and they were all looking at the tablet? Do you remember that picture came out? It was everyone was huddled around Tua, and they were looking at the tablet on the perform field. It was like a really famous picture that offseason because a bunch of the receivers were showing up and showing out. Listen, everyone knows I get along with Nick Hicks. I can count how many times I was told on one hand, and I don't even need to use all 5 fingers, how many times Gesicki actually showed up to to work out with those guys. Like when that picture was posted, Gesicki was posting a picture of him on a yacht. You know what I mean? Like all you got to do, because you know what I hate people now because of Gesicki, David. People see an athletic guy who needs work and blocking, and all of a sudden, oh, he's Mike Gesicki, I don't want him. No. Don't start putting Mike Gesicki's work ethic traits on all these kids who haven't even had a shot yet. That's where my whole point with that thing is. And that's why when you talk about Mallory, look at how hard that kid wanted to prove to himself just by running that 40. I never saw anything like, Mike Gesicki just felt like, okay, it's just going to come to me. Like I felt like that guy thought he's going to walk on to free agency this year. And it's like, okay, I'm going to get 10 million no matter what. No one's going to stop me. Right. Well, and so.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go as far as making accusations on his work ethic because those are all off the field, off season things. And hey, if he had a vacation plan, then the guy has his off season time to himself as well. I mean, because at Dolphins practices, you always see him staying after practice, catching extra balls off the jugs machine. A lot of the team is already inside when the open locker room media session becomes available to us, and then we're walking through the practice field to go into the locker room, and most of the time he's actually still out there catching extra passes afterward. Now that's catching passes, not where we really needed to see a lot more improvement, which was in the blocking aspect of the game. We already knew Mike Gesicki could catch balls, but yeah, just as far as
did he last year though? Because I seem to remember I seem to remember Tua hitting him in the face mask, right through his hands in the face mask in the end zone. And I was like, bro, the one thing we franchise tagged you to do, you couldn't even do that. And I was like,
there was a fourth down play in San Francisco as well. That one went to him. He did have very limited opportunities, but did get red zone chances. I mean, he still got some touchdowns, but actually more than in 2021, but
yeah, but my problem was right.
Career lows and snap counts too.
You know what my issue was? If you go back and watch those touchdowns, how many of them was he either A, wide open, or B, did he outvert the guy? My issue with Gesicki too, you got that big frame. How many physical battles did you see him win at the catch point? He could only win at the catch point if he basically was the better athlete than you at the catch point. But if you were just as good of an athlete, and guys who play the body and the ball at the catch point, they're going to win like 9 times out of 10 against Gesicki. And so what good is your size? You know what I mean? Like, that's why he's a big slot. He's not even really a tight end. He's like a big slot or a seam threat. Like that's what he is. That's what he is. And I mean, hey, I'm not going to do your thing, boo-boo. Go get your bag. I'm not going to hate on you, but, you just...
He has to go, yeah. He had to go somewhere else in free agency. I think a lot of the fans, it was more so that he went to a rival for a lot of the fans. Now we'll see what Bill Belichick can do with him.
The fans have to look at the tight end minds we had in the room, though, just between Frank Smith and John Embry alone. Go look at John Embry's tight end. That guy started off with Tony Gonzalez, developed Jordan Cameron into a stud, George Kittle, Chris Cooley was an all-pro under him. Like, all these guys, he's developed, you know what I mean? And that's why I said before the season, if anyone's going to get Gesicki right, it's going to be these guys, and they couldn't. And that just tells me he's a big slot. He's not a tight end. So, anyways, hey, I wish him nothing but the best of luck, except when we play him.
Which will be twice.
So, last question here. Do you see them, because we don't fully understand or know what Channing Tindall is? And what really worried me about Channing Tindall, and one thing he said in this offseason, was how hard the playbook was for him to grasp last year. And now we're totally changing the defense. So he's got to learn a whole new playbook, a whole new terminology. Do you see them potentially, if a guy like, I don't know, maybe if a guy like Jack Campbell falls, I know they really love DeMarvion Overshown. If one of those guys are there, could you see them maybe adding another interior line, even maybe an Owen Popo? Could you see them adding another interior linebacker to this core draft?
Yeah, that's another one. I don't think the Dolphins are fully done at linebacker. I mean, they added David Long, Jerome Baker's situation. We talked about that. I mean, I know you shook your head. Maybe Fangio sees it the same way. Maybe he does want to try to pair Baker and Long. But if they could move on from his contract and find a trade partner and still find a linebacker at that 51 spot, and Jack Campbell was there, then that would be exceptional. He could be a leader of the defense type of guy for maybe the next decade. So, I mean, he showed a lot more than a lot of people even expected, even with how at the combine, even with how high so many people were on him. But yeah, award winner at linebacker in the college game, a guy who could really lead a defense, sharp communication skills. Yeah, I mean, that would be exceptional to just stick in the middle of this Fangio defense with so much else that's around him at all these positions that we talked about, how defense is so loaded at every level. And if you're able to get a guy like him in the draft, then yeah, I'd be all for that.
All right, final question. How do you see the Cedric Wilson thing playing out? Do you think he's here for this year? I mean, it's pretty much no secret that if they could have moved off the contract, they would. Obviously, the Cowboys were interested, apparently, but then they moved into a different direction. How do you think Cedric is here? Because, listen, people are very impatient with, that's one thing we've learned with this fan base. People are very impatient, especially with Eazy-E. And I've kind of told people, listen, trust the process with Eazy-E, because Wes Welker went to his school. Wes Welker understands that Texas Tech receivers, they don't have the most adverse or advanced route tree when they come out of college. They're just not built like that in Texas Tech. If anyone knows how to mold a guy coming out of Texas Tech, it's the guy who came out of Texas Tech and Wes Welker. You got to think they want to give Eazy-E some more chances here, especially in the red zone, because of his skill set and what he offers. I mean, the guy, a lot of Debo similarities. How do you see the whole Cedric Wilson Jr. thing playing out? Do you see him being here for another year? Do you see them maybe trying to dangle him for even a late round draft pick? Or maybe we talked about when we get to the trade deadline, could he be a guy they package along with a draft pick in the move for a running back or a player to add at the trade deadline?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, based on what you got out of him last year and at that contract, then yeah, the Dolphins would want to move on from him, find a trade partner. That's the whole issue, is then it's finding the trade partner, if it's for a late round pick, if it's for a pick swap, something, especially now. So you hope you get that development out of Eazy-E. You brought in Braxton Berrios, so you're keeping River Craycraft here. So Trent Sherfield, you moved on from. Now he's going to be in Buffalo. And if not, then okay, maybe you could end up finding something in Cedric Wilson, give him another shot in this offense next year, and hope you get something closer to what you paid for, even though you probably won't really get him up to that level. But Yeah, that's a situation. Yeah, I think you would have seen the Dolphins already pull off a trade if they could find a trade partner. But yeah, it's apparent that it has not developed yet. And then if you can't, then you got to roll with what you got and try to get the most out of him. And then just hope for the best. See if you can get something. And then if then he starts showing some signs, then you start having a conversation where maybe later on his value increases and you can find a partner if it's in a package deal, trade deadline move. If you found out that you need to make a move elsewhere and you could throw him in there as well. So all possibilities.
Hey man, I know we talked about your favorite move earlier, David Long, and I pretty much agreed with you. But that Braxton Berrios move is in a close second for me. I think he's a
Hey.
legit return guy, and I'll tell you this much: I think he's going to have a career year with Tua. Tua is going to love Braxton Berrios out of the slot. I think Braxton is. I think he's going to earn a second contract here. I wanted him last year before he re-upped with the Jets for 1 year. I love that move, bro. I think Braxton, if he would have had a better quarterback in New York, I think you would have saw even a better player. Tua's going to love him. I know you covered him in with the Hurricanes and stuff like that.
I wasn't covering the Hurricanes beat yet, but somewhat. I was a youngster still freelancing out of college, and then also then I got my first job covering high school sports and recruiting for the Sun Sentinel while he was in his later years. So maybe filling in here and there. Yeah, I remember interviewing him out on Green Tree.
You a fan?
Field.
Are you a fan of him? Are you a fan of him?
Well, I'm an alum, so I did attend the University of Miami. So I'm a U guy. So I mean, really, the only reason I didn't answer with Braxton Berrios, so I didn't want to fall into my stereotype. I mean, I love just as much.
All right, man. We ran a little bit over time here, but I want you to plug everything you got going on, where people can find you, let everyone know your social media outlets, and yeah, man, a great conversation. But the floor is yours, David.
Yeah, definitely. Follow on Twitter at David Furones _ I think my name's on there, but on the screen. But if you don't have Furones is the last name. I'm sure a lot of you guys already follow if you're big Dolphins fans. Beat writer for the South Florida Sun Sentinel. So definitely read up on everything we have working. Myself, Chris Perkins, our columnist, Dave Hyde, overall sports columnist, who's busy with a lot of March Madness coverage right now, but also has been getting in on the free agency action. Really, well, yeah, that's what our focus has been on this whole month. And then we'll be segueing into some different things. Perk and I, we've been still putting on his show, Dolphins Deep Dive. That's streaming on YouTube as well, and available on our site and in podcast form wherever you get your podcast. So all of that good stuff. Definitely follow along, and hopefully we get some time off at some point in the off season. But and it's a small draft, but then afterwards, then you get into some OTAs later in the off season mini camp. Get to actually see some of this stuff, some of these moves come together. So we'll be covering all of it all off season, heading into training camp for what should be a very exciting 2023 Miami Dolphins season.
Awesome, man. Can't wait. Guys, I'll be back on Sunday for another episode of Fin Too Deep. Me and Neil Driscoll will be live in the day, so be on the lookout for that, another midday matinee. And then Patreons, expect another episode of 3 Takes will be coming later tonight for all of y'all. Until next time, I appreciate each and every one of you for coming through. I appreciate you, David, for coming on. Awesome conversation. Hope you all enjoyed it. And everyone, have a blessed Friday. Fins up all day, every day. Take it easy, guys.